The Airports Company of South Africa has also moved swiftly to reassure airlines and passengers that there's no jet fuel shortage at O.R Tambo International Airport. However, over the weekend, United Airlines put out notices of flight cancellations due to concerns about jet fuel supply. For an industry already battered by pandemic lockdowns, the rising price of fuel globally, and a series of safety scares with in-flight incidents, it's not a great look. Joining me now is Guy Leitch, editor of SA Flyer magazine. Good evening, Guy. Thank you for joining us this Freedom Day. So United Airlines reportedly had to cancel at least one flight due to fuel shortages or concerns around fuel shortages. Can you tell us whether they actually did have to cancel flights and whether there was a bit of a jet fuel supply crisis at O.R Tambo International?
Yeah, hi, Sally. Well, they didn't have to strictly cancel the flight, but the problem was that they weren't assured that there would be fuel supplies for them when they got to South Africa, and that meant that they wouldn't have any assurance of being able to get back to the United States. The problem with these ultra-long-haul flights, which is what United Airlines is flying, is that they use a colossal amount of fuel, typically close to 100 tons of fuel at a time. So you can imagine that if the airport was trying to slow down its fuel demands, the first flights it would have cancelled are those with the enormous fuel uplifts like the United flights, and rather keep the local airlines flying or the more regional airlines flying. It needs also to be pointed out, though, that other airlines were able to use fuel depots at the other airports. For instance, Qatar was able to fly into Durban and fill up there, and Cape Town has not had a shortage of fuel either. But so it was probably a little bit of, in a sense, an overreaction from ACSA's part and a natural caution on the part of United that saw these flights cancelled. But the real problem is quite simply that the floods in Durban have damaged the supply chain, the transport infrastructure. The airport should have had as much as 7 days worth of fuel stocks in reserve, and it was rapidly heading down to 3, if not even 1.6. And that obviously meant that the supply was not coming in as fast as the consumption, and sooner or later it would have run dry. It's very reassuring to hear that they seem to have managed to patch it up.
So my understanding is that the railway is only going to be fixed, I think, by around sort of early June. And as you say, it's only O.R Tambo International, the line to that part of the country where these big tankers, these rail tankers of fuel need to travel. That's the problem area. You can still get your jet fuel in other parts of the country. Talk to me about the workaround plan. Do you think it's going to be absolutely smooth sailing or smooth flying until that railway track is repaired?
No, because they must be sucking in fuel tankers from everywhere in the country to try and move the fuel from Durban. They used to use the oil pipeline. They used to sort of share it and put plugs in and put a segment of it to carry Jet A for the airlines. I don't know why they're not looking at that at this time. There's been no discussion of reusing the fuel pipeline again. But clearly, they're pulling in road tankers from wide and far. And the problem with that is that aircraft fuel tankers are absolutely dedicated to what they do. You know, you can't just suddenly use a tanker that was designed to carry something else to carry fuel because of the quality control requirements. So, but they're pulling in fuel from the other areas, from Bloemfontein, perhaps from Lanseria. And also the airlines have been encouraged to do what they call tankering, which means actually taking as much fuel as they can from their starting point when flying into O.R Tambo, so they don't have to refuel much, if any, at O.R Tambo to get back again. But again, that option doesn't exist for the long-haul flights.
Is that going to the fact that these international airlines flying into O.R Tambo have to think about an alternative, you know, as you say, the tankering or perhaps refueling a little bit earlier? Is that going to lead any of them to go, look, let's just cancel some of the flights, or not at all?
Well, you're exactly right. That's exactly what's happened with United. And it's a great pity because the American market was slowly getting back into gear. And we obviously are desperate for the new normal or even the old normal to be reestablished as quickly as possible. And that means we need as many incoming flights as absolutely possible. you know, again, we've seen massive strides by the by Westgrow and the Western Cape air uplift, and that will also all be undone too if the fuel supply is not there to support the actual airline operations.
Just for clarity, my understanding is that United Airlines was just saying this over the weekend. Are you saying that they actually are cancelling flights going forward?
No, my understanding is that today's flight is in fact operating, and I believe that going forward they haven't cancelled any further flights.
All right. You know, the local aviation industry has just been battered. I mean, obviously it's a global issue as well, but just locally, it's been the lockdowns, the price of fuel, which has been going up, but also these recent in-flight incidents, now all cleared, but concerns around whether everything is as it should be in an industry that relies on meticulous checks and balances. If you look at all the problems facing aviation in South Africa specifically, what are you most concerned about?
The single greatest problem right now is the loss of skills. The industry is still pretty much on its knees in a sense, having only got back to about 58% of its pre-COVID levels. And yet already it is finding itself with a massive skill shortage. We're seeing a shortage of engineers, which is why we have seen these maintenance glitches pop up at a greater than normal rate. We've seen a shortage of air traffic controllers. Air traffic zones have had to be combined, so increasing the loads on existing air traffic controllers. And the problem's not going to get any better soon, because during COVID, as many as 30–40% of South Africa's most experienced pilots simply retired or went into other jobs. And it takes ages. It takes 10 years to build an airline pilot. So the airline industry is going to recover far faster than the supply of pilots and, of course, the associated support staff.
Of course, you know, with many pilots retrenched from SAA as one example, you'd imagine that there would be quite a few pilots available, but you're explaining a lot of them have just simply retired or changed professions. And I understand that this is a global problem, so it's not like we can import pilots that easily, am I right?
Well, ultimately, that's probably what's going to have to happen, but obviously at great cost. SAA has managed to just about halve the costs of employment of pilots because the remainder are so desperate to stay employed. But again, that situation is not going to last forever. As the demand for pilots increases around the world, so they're going to increase the remuneration packages offered to South Africans to come and work in places that they might not otherwise have worked at. For instance, the so-called sandpit, the Gulf III airlines, and even China, which is offering pilots now as much as 3 times what they're earning in South Africa. So it's going to be increasingly difficult to match those large salaries and keep South Africa's pilots local and in South Africa.
All right, so I guess it's a good time to be a pilot or any skilled staff member in the aviation industry. Thank you so much, Guy Leitch, editor of SA Flyer magazine. Now, let's